What's up, everyone? Today we're talking about the science of stretching and what you must know about flexibility training. We're really going to go deep on this one. People seem to conceptualize their muscles like Play-Doh, as though flexibility is making the muscles longer, or as though your stretching is making the muscles longer. It's not.
What's up, everybody? My name is Yanni Burmeister. To my left is none other than Phil White, and across the table is Rad. Richie's behind the mixer. Together we are Unity Gym and the Unify Movement System. If you want to know how we make driven people into athletes, download our blueprints. They're free and they're wicked. How is everyone?
Good.
I'm wicked.
Wicked.
Wicked. I haven't used that word for a while.
Yeah, well, it's appropriate because Rad is getting wicked messages in his coffee, apparently. So,
Fucking poltergeist over here, mate.
maybe
I had a very clear letter A in my coffee crema this morning. It even had the angles and everything. It wasn't like an abstract A. It was an A.
A specific
I'm
A
waiting.
for us, man.
and
Yeah,
here we
that's
are to
right.
talk about science. All right.
Now, Rad didn't want to give too much away yesterday, but this week we're going deep into flexibility training. We had a couple of really good questions from our tribe members. Vinny Brown asked us last week how you deload stretching, and it sort of got us thinking. We haven't done a good week on flexibility principles and flexibility science for a while, and we thought we'd have a real crack at this and go deep into it because we're working on a super exciting project this week. I don't know whether I'm allowed to give it away, but I'm going to give it away anyway. We're doing a version 2 of the Mobility Masterclass at the moment, and Rad and Richie are busy at the moment filming all of the workouts. We want to level up.
Days of filming today.
We want to level up that program for all of our tribe because a lot of our UMS online coaching tribe have been getting incredible results from that program. And the truth is, we designed that program like 4 or 5 years ago now.
Well, the truth, people are getting great results. We all got great results from that program. Everybody did, but I don't do it anymore. And I don't do it anymore because I know better ways to do things.
Well, we're constantly leveling up and
that's
learning.
right. That's what happens. You know,
That's what you should be doing.
That's right. And I wrote that program 5 years ago now. And back then,
God, it's been 5 years since we wrote the Mobility Masterclass. I cannot believe it's been that
maybe
long.
it hasn't been 5 years since we wrote it. Maybe it's been about, because it was one of the first programs that we launched the 18-minute stretching routine, and then very quickly afterwards we launched the Mobility Masterclass. Actually, maybe it's
when
been about,
we say we launched them in our gym. We didn't launch them online.
No, launched them online. I'm talking about online. I'm talking about we launched online. We launched the 18-minute stretching
November
routine.
2018 was
That's
when
right.
we launched the
Yep,
18-minute
that's right.
routine.
That's right.
2 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. So the Mobility Masterclass was written 2 years, was launched 2 years ago, but it's based on the stuff that we learned 5 years ago.
Yeah, right.
And since then, I've learned so much more. I've worked with some really good coaches, and yeah, I do things differently. So that's why we're doing a version 2 of it for those who want to level up. And for everyone in our UMS online coaching program, of course, it's going to be part of the program for you guys. You'll get access to it straight away.
Yeah, there's nothing like a good argument or disagreement on the show first thing in the morning. Dave Clark, welcome. Remember, guys, before we get started on this topic, if you are catching the live on the UMS Movement Mastermind Facebook group, let us know who you are, where you're tuning in from. We love to know who we're talking to. And if you've got any questions, get them in. I know Phil's just gagging to answer a couple of questions that he didn't get to yesterday, which we'll try to do today. But without further ado, let's dive into it. We're going to be covering a lot about flexibility this week. Today, our goal, just to set the rules so that we stay on topic, we're going to be talking about the brain and nervous system's role in gaining flexibility, which is a really, really, really important concept for people to understand. We're going to be talking about why true flexibility cannot be achieved in the absence of strength. We've flipped the quote that's on our wall around, and quite frankly, this was Phil's idea, and it's true. And I think we may need to redo our quote. How to develop end range strength and why it's important is the final topic of discussion today. It's a big show. But it's really important that you guys understand that flexibility is not elasticity of your muscles. It's your brain and central nervous systems delaying inhibitors in the body that prevent you from harm. So let's dive into that.
Yeah, and keen to hear people who are watching what flexibility goals are you working on at the moment? Are you aiming for splits? Is it about upper body? Are you trying to get a back bridge? Keen to hear what you guys are working on, and because then we can make it a bit, for the first person who gets here and tells us what they're working on, we can try and make it really, in line with what you're working on. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So let's get in to the first point and talk about the role of the brain and the nervous system in gaining flexibility. So for a very long time, I was under the false belief that when you stretch, you're making your muscle fibers longer and you're making them more elastic. And I think a lot of people are still under that belief, because when we say this stuff, people really look at you like, oh my God, I've never heard that before. And it wasn't until very recently that I did hear this. The muscles are elastic already. They're very, very elastic. And they do warm up and cool down, and that's really just to do with blood circulation, isn't it?
So just to
Phil,
challenge you
when
on that one,
there's
actually, the part of the muscle unit that's the most elastic is actually the tendon.
Yep.
So the tendon is great for energy storage and release, where it really uses there's actually one of the types of fibers in the tendon itself is called elastin, for a really good reason, because it's very springy and elastic. Whereas with muscles, it's much more about the basically you have like lots of little feet on your muscle fibers that kind of crawl one way and then they relax and they crawl back the other way.
Mm-hmm.
And so the elastic component to that really comes from the tendon itself rather than the muscle.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, but basically what happens when you get to the end of your range, meaning, if you lean down to touch your toes, and when you start to feel it in your hamstrings and you can't go any further because it feels really tight down the back of your legs and the back of your knees, that's not that your muscles, it's most likely not that your muscles aren't flexible enough to go further. What's happening is that there's a reaction from the brain and from the central nervous system where the brain gets a signal that we're going closer to the end of the range, and it sends a signal back through the nervous system saying, tighten up the muscles to protect ourselves. And what happens is that the process of stretching is delaying that process. So meaning that, let's say you go to touch your toes and your hands get to your knees and that process kicks in. Through good stretching, a couple of months later, the process will kick in when your hands get to the middle of your shins. And then a few months after that, the process will kick in when your hands get down to your feet. So in a real nutshell, that's what's going on when you stretch. And the problem that a lot of people have when they're stretching, this is certainly what I experienced, is that you can't rush the process. You can only allow it to unfold. And if you go to the point of pain where if you actually do some small tears in the muscle, some very low grade tears, then what you do is you reinforce the brain's fear around going to that range, and it actually stifles that process and it kicks in the inhibitors even earlier. So a lot of people say, how do I know if I've gone to pain? The easiest way to tell is if in the next stretching session or a week later, when you're trying to stretch, you feel like you can't go as far as you could before. Stretching should produce small but tangible improvements, over short periods of time.
Yeah.
And just to go back to with the muscle being quite elastic, the stretch shortening cycle is kind of the active component to that elastic structure of the muscle itself. So basically what that means is when something gets stretched beyond a certain limit in the brain puts on the muscles, it will be like, whoa, okay, that's far enough, and then it will actively kind of go back the other direction. And so that's where the active component of the elasticity of the muscle comes from. And that's a really key thing to understand when we look at how we want to develop flexibility, is overcoming that brain sort of forced to stop on our range.
Yeah. So quickly, I want to just talk about a little example that we give when we do our live workshops here at Unity Gym to prove this concept. Dave Clark saying here wanting to do side splits and dynamic flexibility for Taekwondo. So Dave, you're going to be able to really visualize what I'm talking about here, being into martial arts. When you stand tall and you raise one leg, whether you have a friend do it or whether you have the strength to do it yourself, raise one leg out to the side so that one leg is kind of mimicking what you'd be doing in the side splits if both legs were doing it at the same time. You most likely, being into Taekwondo, you will be able to do that quite effortlessly. You'll be able to raise one leg up to the side, whether you lean it against a wall or something, or have someone hold it or put it on a chair. You can get that leg to 90 degrees. There's nothing joining the two legs together. There's no muscle or muscle body that joins one quadricep or one adductor to the other adductor. They both join into the pelvis, into the SI joint. So theoretically, to the pelvis, yeah.
Pubis.
Pubis.
Not the SI joint.
Theoretically, you should, if there was no brain attached to this equation, you should be able to, everybody should be able to do, anyone who can lift one leg up to 90 degrees to the side should be able to do the splits, right? Why can't you do the splits? Because your brain prevents it from happening. And that's a really nice example of, a really nice example to display how strongly it's important that you guys understand the role of the brain and the central nervous system in gaining flexibility. So for someone like Dave, who's wanting to be able to kick higher and do the side splits and dynamic flexibility, this is where end range strength and the concept of why true flexibility cannot be achieved in the absence of strength is 100% what you need to focus on. You need to focus on developing confidence in those ranges, but also developing strength in those ranges. And the way we do it at Unity Gym and in our mobility masterclass programs and things like that, and the way the seniors do it here, we don't start out with end range strength. We start out developing flexibility, and then slowly as we progress through different phases of our training, we start to focus, once the guys are unlocking more range, we start to focus on developing that end range strength to take them to a whole nother level. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. It's not just end range strength though, it's also active flexibility. So developing strength through the range of the muscles, so keeping the muscles doing loaded stretching, where a classic example would be a single leg good morning, where you're going down even without any weight on your back. You're loading the hamstring eccentrically as you go down. And we do that with all different positions, like the active middle splits is another one where that's not so much end range strength, like you're not contracting the opposing muscle groups, but you're putting the muscles that you're trying to create flexibility in under load, which is also a really important part of it as well. And that's what we use at the earlier stage. We use loaded stretching.
Loaded stretching, yeah.
Which has been one of the biggest breakthroughs for me, for all of us, to be honest.
All of us, yeah, absolutely.
When I started to learn about loaded stretching and started doing it, and the changes that I saw were massive, massive. And that was the first big level up to go from the 18-minute stretching routine towards the mobility masterclass was that incorporation of loaded stretching, which was just so different than anything I'd ever done before, like using weights to stretch.
I think it's important that, and I'm going to beat the progressive overload drum here. I think it's important that we emphasize the journey that we took, because it definitely plays a role in how flexible you get. You have to build confidence and comfort in stretches and in mobilization and in the concepts that we're going to be talking about this week. And there needs to be a progressive nature, like all training. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about later in the week, which Phil's gagging to talk about, is that flexibility.
I'm doing a lot of gagging today.
He's excited. Okay, Phil's excited to talk about it. Is that stretching and flexibility training is load to the body, load to the muscles, just like strength training, just like resistance training, and that we're going to talk about that more when we talk about the concept of a deload period for stretching, which is really what nudged us into this direction for the series this week. Thanks, Vinny Brown. He's on the stream live. See, what we listen, brother. We listen. We watch what you guys are talking about and asking, and the questions that we feel provide value to everybody. We're going to do series on them. But yeah, this concept of doing the 18-minute routine, which we did for quite a while. And we probably, in all fairness, did it for too long. We probably should have done it for maybe a few months, 3 or 6 months, and then progressed onto the loaded stretching routine that we created, and then the mobility masterclass. The problem that you guys are so lucky. Like, everyone that has access to our programs, you get, we test it and often test it for too long and we wait till we plateau and it stops delivering a result, and then we have to go back to the drawing board and figure things out. You guys get just exactly the right dosage of everything because we make recommendations, So you like, it's funny, a post went up from one of our tribe members, Lockie, who's 44. He was on the show last week, right? He was on the podcast last week. He's our ultimate athlete from this year or last year, and
which is an award that people get in the gym.
yeah, it's an award where the most balance in strength, flexibility, and fitness gets our ultimate athlete, and he's the picture went up of him doing the front
I'm gonna
splits. He's
share it.
doing a better front splits than me now, and this is something that we have to accept as the coaches here. Like the path that we lay out to our tribe is better than the path we've trodden ourselves, you know, and so they're getting faster results than we get, which is painful sometimes, you know.
I can't share an image in the chat.
Totally
on Facebook.
painful. No, it doesn't
Share
let you.
link.
It doesn't let you share an image in the chat. You
put a
can't
link
do
in.
it. Yeah.
Sucks. All right, okay, I'll
Yeah.
put a link in. Yeah, have a look at this. Anyone that's on the live show, click that.
We
and
just
have a
need to
look.
get. We need to get Richie to just bring him up, like
Yeah.
boom.
Oh, actually, I can. Yeah, I can share it. I'll send it to Richard, and he'll bring it up on the stream.
We'll bring it up on the stream. It's
send
super
that.
impressive, mate. 44
Yeah.
years old, and you got to
Oh,
understand
he could
that
barely
this
touch
guy,
his toes when he started.
this guy came to
He
us
could
compromised.
honestly
He
barely.
wasn't just that he couldn't touch his toes. He had like back problems and all sorts of stuff, and he had this mad injury identity of being this compromised human.
Check your email, Richie, and
Now
when,
he's
you,
just-
when you can throw that picture up. Let
Now
us
he's
know when
just
it's
a
up there.
beast.
Yeah, Lockie, I've just emailed it to you. It's got no subject. Yeah, it is. It's amazing, and it is. It's amazing what can be achieved when you start to learn these principles, and this is why we're doing version 2 of the Mobility Masterclass now, because to see how much people enjoyed getting version 2 of the 18-minute stretching routine. It is important, you know. We've leveled up, we've learnt more, we do things differently, so why aren't we sharing that stuff with our tribe? you know?
So just quickly, because we did promise to reveal the real science behind stretching, so I'd like to get the only person who's really got a claim to being able to talk about it next to me.
Patiently waiting over
To
here.
talk, patiently waiting. Let's talk about the true science of stretching and see.
Rich, what other tabs have you got open there? Let's have a look. Zen Planner.
Yeah.
So for those who are on the podcast, Richie, we're still figuring out the technology. So there's a live stream of Rich's computer going on, and nothing too sus. So that's good.
Nothing sus.
And
Luckily.
so, I'd like to go back to what Rad mentioned at the beginning in the introduction about people's sort of like conceptual understanding of what's happening when people are stretching. And I think that, it's kind of the brain often likes to go to the simplest sort of understanding of how things work. And basically, like, if I stretch this thing, it will become longer. We've learned that from playing with Play-Doh as a kid, and you pull on one end and it just gets longer and longer and longer. And that's kind of the simple way that people sort of jump to as what's happening at a much obviously slower rate in flexibility training. And the problem with that model is, for one, it's not right, but it also kind of gives people the impression that the only way to overcome the shortness that they think is in their muscles is to stretch harder and to stretch for longer. And that is definitely
Not the answer. Yeah.
And it's going to lead to a body that's going to be pretty beat up. Because,
And I can testify to that.
Yeah, which is exactly what we were talking about yesterday with how Rad's journey through stretching and now all of our stretching journey has really changed over time to be much more about like facilitating the body into these positions in a way that it might seem like we say a lot of the same stuff.
Check
all
that
the
out,
time,
guys.
but
Looking on the stream,
yeah.
have a look at Lockie. 44
Yeah.
years old. Couldn't touch his toes really when he started here.
Yeah,
Yep.
super impressive. Full front splits for those who are on the podcast.
Mm.
And so basically, we've Rad's understanding is, and all of our understanding is it's translated into now a model that is all about treating flexibility just as we do with the strength principles of progressive overload, and basically getting your body used to the positions we want to be in, because it's about your brain letting your body get into that position, because the brain is all about survivability and protecting your body. And so any sort of big changes and threatening sort of positions to be in is going to be inhibited. So we like the brain is a real sort of, and the body slowly adapts to what we stimulate it to do. So
Yeah, awesome.
basically, like, by using these overload principles of giving adequate intensity and rest in between our stretches, it basically teaches the body, like, hey, I want to be able to do this, but I'm not going to push it. Just
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
give it time, give it rest, and then you're going to do it again and come back,
Yep.
give it a rest again and again. And just like that, your body starts to realize, like, oh, okay, maybe this is something that I do need, and therefore I'll allow that movement to go further. I'll allow those muscle fibers to lengthen past that usual rate. And it also then starts to stimulate the passive structures, which are going to be like your joint capsules, the ligaments in your back, all the sort of things to very slowly over time allow for a longer length.
Yeah. So much like anything, it is the speed and rate that you will become flexible is very dictated by your past, your history, how long you've sort of neglected flexibility training for. That's why people who were maybe into gymnastics or a sport, martial arts when they were children and had developed a decent level of flexibility already, when they come back to it as an adult, they develop it much quicker, because I guess there's some sort of element of their body remembering that, yes, I've done this before, it's okay. Whereas someone who's never worked on flexibility before and has been, has given themselves the identity of a very inflexible person and told themselves that over and over and over again, that I'm tight, I'm inflexible, I'm compromised, I'm vulnerable. When they come into the gym, they're often...
And if I did what those people were doing, I'd break and...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and like words are powerful, guys. I could do a whole show on the psychology around how you speak to yourself and how you talk about your body.
I think we have, haven't we?
We probably have. Yeah, words are very powerful, But we get these people in often, and then they're the ones that get very frustrated when they don't get the same results as someone else. But they're constantly in this perpetual cycle of talking themselves down about how incapable they are.
Yeah, and that usually comes from a place of the very human nature way of approaching a problem is like try it really hard for a little while, and then and probably go too hard because it takes like a certain threshold of motivation to actually make a change in your life. So often it's like, oh, I know I should do this. Okay, I'll throw everything at it, go really hard.
Yep.
I'll stretch really hard, and then injury, and then
I relate to that.
Then that starts that cycle again. But now with now you've actually had an experience of like this is actually bad for me, so it's just not for me. Like I can't do this. My body doesn't work this way, other people's does. But really,
my thing that I really feel like we should reinforce on today, because we're talking so much about how, and the key take home message today is how big the brain's role is in flexibility, how much of a role the central nervous system plays. Then psychology is going to play a big role too, And one of the things that I see happen with people in Unity Gym is that they come in and they do a few months of the program and they really realize, holy crap, this is a pretty amazing method that these guys are following, and they embrace it. And they start to believe it. Mm-hmm. And you see the change in someone's psychology. Because it's intoxicating to see other people around you doing the things that you want to do. And that starts to play out this sort of self-perpetuating journey where you're inspired by the people around you, and you start to talk differently about yourself and what your capabilities might be. And
especially when they're people just like you who are kind of, similar place in life, maybe working, or even, and especially when it's someone older than you, or, someone who you would make a judgment of like, oh, they're probably pretty unfit or something, and then they pull out something,
that's exactly right. And so what I really want people to start thinking about from today's show is that, when you're training on your own, and maybe training in a gym where the culture is not really supportive of flexibility training, it might be a bodybuilding gym, or just a 24-hour gym model or something like that, where you
Probably
don't.
99% of gyms.
That's right. Yeah. Then you have to. You're the only one you're accountable to yourself, and you have to start changing the way that you approach your flexibility training. A big part of that is patience.
And I think like accountability and also just by like this is why we moved from doing the YouTube live streams, which we loved the YouTube audience that we had, and like that was a real part of like what was growing the Unity Gym online presence. But we moved it to this movement mastermind group because we wanted more interaction within the community members themselves, because we know that 99% of the gyms out there are not like what we do here.
Yep.
And so this is a great like place for you to put up your videos, share your experiences with it, and that helps build everyone's identity of progress and
performance and
progress,
and exactly
brings
right.
accountability in. So
exactly right.
And if we just come back, because we haven't covered a couple of these points, back to the science of stretching. So we've spoken about the role of the brain. So we want to really go into now the role of strength and end range strength in flexibility, because most people understand that to some degree that you do need to stretch. You need to bring your legs apart and hold that position for a certain amount of time if you want to be able to do the splits. But what
a certain amount of time we are going to reveal on Thursday's show when we talk about dosage.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
But what a lot of people don't understand is that if you talk about the middle splits, most people understand, and even if you don't know what these muscles are, that you need to become more flexible in the adductors, which are the muscles that are in your groin and that run from your groin down to the knee on the inside of your thigh. But what a lot of people don't understand is that it's also about creating strength in the adductors, and it's about creating strength in the glutes when you're at that end of your range, which is the opposing muscle groups. They're the abductors, the muscles that pull the legs apart. And a lot of people don't understand that. And that is a real revelation for people when you understand that sometimes it's not that you're not flexible enough in your adductors that's stopping you from being able to do the middle splits. Quite often it's that you're not strong enough in your glutes. And an easy way to tell that is, this is just an example with the splits. If you lay down on your back with your legs up in the air and pull your legs apart, if your legs can't go 70% of the way that they would go if they're pulled apart by somebody else or by an external force, it's not a lack of flexibility in your adductors, it's a lack of strength in the glutes.
Glute medius and
Glute
medius to be
medius,
specific.
Yep.
So that's just one example, but then the same thing goes for the hip flexors and quads when it comes to the front.
Every joint. There's an inverse relationship between the opposing muscles, and you have to make sure that you're developing strength at the same rate that you're developing flexibility.
Yeah.
So I think a really important thing to understand about basically flexibility and certain movements is that it's going to be about how the muscles can allow a certain movement, so the ability of the muscles to relax into that position, but it also does come down to joint shape and also passive structures within the joint as well. So it's just important to understand that, like, you know, we're very much focusing on muscles here, but it's really important to appreciate that the shape and the size of your joint will definitely impact it as well. So with some people pushing into front and middle splits, that can be quite aggravating if you have a very deep socket and a relatively sort of longer, you know, head of the femur, because you can start to get passive structure limitations, and that's where it just becomes even more important if you do have passive structure limitations that your active structures are strong as well. So if you are only going into a completely passive stretch, then you end up running into the you basically get a lot more glide in the joint. We've talked a lot about sort of glide in joint as being a unwanted response of a like a global muscle pulling you in a certain direction. So when you if you're going into middle splits, for example, then that's going to cause, you know, the ball just won't perfectly rotate if the active structures are off. It'll get a glide and a rotation. So that's why it's really important to understand that, like, if we can build in these active approaches to stretching, so our end range strength stuff and you know, just general like mobility through range. So all of the Cossack squats, all of that is developing basically the rotator cuff of your hip, so your external rotators and your internal rotators of your hip, plus the glute medius and the glute max, and also the co-contraction of your quads and your hamstrings, all to basically help maintain that nice like limit glide and allow for free movement through that ball and socket joint. So it's so key to understand that there are these passive structure limitations if you don't. That can be quite aggravating and cause injury if you don't.
Now, I want to reinforce, sorry to cut you off because I know we're running out of time, and this is an important story to share. I want to reinforce the need for strength and flexibility development at an equal rate, because there are people out there who have genetic setups and configurations that will allow flexibility much easier and much quicker than the layman or average
just
person.
Quickly go into that, and that's with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or EDS, which is a hypermobility spectrum disorder. So people can be a little bit that or a lot that.
Yep.
You can do a few tests on the internet to find out if you've kind of got that. It's a B, it's not the B, some B test. Anyway, but basically it's about like the actual passive structures and their ability to lengthen, so your ligaments, and but also has all sorts of horrible, like, unfortunate situations, like you get really thin skin, you get poor blood vessels, so it's not a good thing necessarily.
Yep.
And it means that you have to do so much extra work to basically control your joints through that extended range. And it might seem a bit contradictory that it's the passive structures here that are allowing these people to be flexible, because we've talked so much about the brain, but as allowing muscles to lengthen. But remember, it is this interplay between muscles being able to lengthen and also passive joint structures allowing movement.
Yeah. So we've got, Rad and I have a cousin through marriage, not through birth. It's a step cousin of ours who, for the large majority of her adult life, was a contortionist for the circus. And she had incredible flexibility. But what she didn't know when she was developing her skills as a contortionist was that she was one of those people who had this genetic predisposition to hypermobility, which was why she became such a successful contortionist. But over her career, and the last discussion I had with her about this was that she was in an absolute mess now in her, how old's Jasmine now? She'd be late 30s? Mid-30s, yeah. She's had to retire from the circus, and she's riddled with issues now, injuries in her back and in her spine, because she developed such an insane amount of flexibility and didn't realize that, she was largely able to push herself beyond the point that was natural and healthy, and she hadn't developed enough strength in the process. And as a result, she's really in a bit of a bad state now, So, for me, that story reinforces the need for this concept of balance, for the notion of balance and strength and flexibility, because you are going to come across, and you may have a friend like this who is just like, they just can do the splits and they can just do crazy flexibility, and you're trying and you can't, and they can do it with very little practice. And that doesn't mean that it's okay for that person to just do yoga or just do lots of stretching, and the problem is that we tend to do what we're good at. So people that are flexible tend to stretch lots, and they don't strengthen lots.
Yeah, and that starts to become like, they feel confident while stretching, and that plays into that sort of brain side of things as well. So it's
that's right.
Yeah. Just the test I was talking about is called the Beighton score, which is BEIGHTON score, which is I know it's valid in children. I'm not sure if it is valid in adults. So, but definitely it's a test where you basically go through a bunch of different movements, and it can give you an impression of whether or not you are on the hypermobility side of the spectrum.
On the spectrum.
Just to for those who want to do a little at-home test, but don't freak out if you are.
That's right.
Yeah, it can just give you a bit of an impression of like how much you're sort of working on, active versus passive structures.
Brad looks like he's got a joke to share or something.
Well, I thought Lee was referring to my middle splits test, so I called it the RAD middle split test.
Oh, there you go. Okay, guys, just quickly to frame up, we're going to be going deeper onto how to stretch if you're injured tomorrow, which is a really, really important topic to talk about. As I said on Thursday, we're going to be talking about how much should you stretch. We're going to be talking about key dosages depending on your levels of experience and things like that. And then on Friday, we're going to bring this in for a landing with how to deload from stretching. So it's a big week. We're going to go deep into this topic. And if you tune in all week, if you watch these, if your goal is to get flexible, this is going to be a huge series for you. You'll get a lot out of this, guys.
It's a bigger week for me because I have to go out and film a whole brand new program now.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't.
Who's got a violin? Anyway. Who's got a violin? Yeah. All right, guys. Let's bring it in for a landing. Good show, good chat. Thanks for all of the people on the live stream. Remember, everyone who's watching the replay on YouTube, big shout out for those who are listening on the podcast. The podcast is growing every week. Make sure you do get yourself over to Facebook and join our UMS Movement Mastermind. It's a private group. You have to apply and agree to abide by the code of conduct, and you'll be in. And you can check these out live. We do stream them live, and you can interact with us and all of that fun stuff. See you tomorrow.
Bye.
See you, everyone.
Health is about performance, not just body image.
You better be willing to accept what you're going to have to do to get there.
We'll start focusing on movement goals, strength goals, flexibility goals.
When you nail that skill, that's there forever.
The body image goal doesn't get you that
It's
far.
the consistency and frequency that's going to get you there. It's not the intensity.
There's no shortcuts to mastery and movement. Destination doesn't change overnight, but your direction will.
The gym is not the place to beat up the body that you hate. It's the place to build the body that you love.
We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.